Hey, what's up, vinyl people? It's Don Wilkins with Bow Records, and this is part two of the great debut debate. So stay with me. You're watching Bow Records. Hey, welcome back, vinyl people. I'm Don Wilkins with Bow Records, a mobile and social media vinyl shop based out of Owensboro, Kentucky. And like I said in the intro, we're going to be talking about the great debut debate, part two. And I left off in 1983 in my part one of this video, and so I'm going to pick up in 1984, and we're talking about some of the albums that Rolling Stone magazine ranked as in the top 100 debut albums of all time. And then some of these albums are just some of my favorite debut albums, and then others are just ones I thought you might find interesting to see and talk about. So, one of the cool things about this is the historical aspect of many of these albums. And the first album has a lot of historical significance to it, and is one of my Grill albums. So we're talking about from 1984, Run DMC, self-titled. And these guys pretty much brought hip-hop into the mainstream, and one of the main ways they did that, their single off of this, Rock Box, was the first hip-hop video ever played on MTV, and that was in the summer of 1984. And rap just exploded in the 80s, and then has evolved since then into other subgenres. And you also had It's Like That as one single on there. Another hit was Hard Times. They set the tone and the bar, and this album was ranked actually number 37 on that list from Rolling Stone of great debut albums of all time. So just great. Next up is this was a funny one because the artist is well known, but his debut not one of the probably not one of the great debuts, but still interesting. Bon Jovi, is self-titled. Only really one hit off of this, Runaway. And they really didn't make it big until their third album, Slippery When Wet. Their second album, 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit. Their first two albums were, so-so, but their third album, like I said, Slippery When Wet, had all the great songs on there, Living on a Prayer, and all those songs that went with that one. And Bon Jovi, I'm not for sure if he'll still be turning 9. He lost his voice, and don't know if he'll get it back. But anyway, Slippery When Wet, if you have that in your collection, you should be very happy with that. Next up, we want to get into hair metal. Hair metal was a big part of the 80s, and Rat was one of the first hair metal bands. Their album, Out of the Cellar. And as you can tell, it was, well, I had it signed. Now this looks more like just one big scribble mark here by, it says to Don, scribble mark, Stephen Pearcy. It says, it does say Rat and Row down here, and that is on this cover here. None other than Tawny Kitaen. She was kind of known for the Whitesnake videos, but kind of a model during the 80s. And she was actually dating Rat guitarist Robbie Crosby at this time. And Rat kind of came back. I mean, they did some touring, but they really came back into the mainstream in 2020, with those Geico commercials. We have a rat problem. It's a great commercial, and just enjoyed that. Those of us who remember rap, back in their heyday anyway. So, next up, in between the hip hop and the and their hair metal, we have none other than Whitney Houston. Her debut, self-titled, from 1985. Ranked number 89 in Rolling Stone's list. This album, How Will I Know, Greatest Love of All, and Saving All My Love for You, and You Give Good Love. Some monster hits on this album. Unfortunately, she died tragically in 2012 at age 48, way too young. And, she was married to Bobby Brown. He had a decent solo career. He was with that band New Edition whenever he was a teenager, and they got married and lived their life in the public, and it all played out. She was just had a gift for a voice, and just sad to lose her when we did, because she could have gone on to make even more great music. So, all right, next up, another grail of mine from 1986, an original pressing, the Beastie Boys, Licensed to Ill. Just an iconic album in and of itself. There's some controversy over that. I'll let you figure that out. And, you're talking about, Mike D, Ad Rock, and MCA, the three members of the band. You're talking about Fight for Your Right to Party. Couldn't get away from that song on MTV when it came out. Paul Revere, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, which is a spoof off Motorhead's song No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Two songs sound nothing alike, but the Beastie Boys, they had a little bit of humor in them, and so anyway, it was supposed to be a spoof off of that. And Brass Monkey, this album was produced by Rick Rubin, one of the great all-time producers. It ranked 48th, for Rolling Stone. To me, it should have been a lot lower. Could have been a top 10 album as far as I'm concerned. But sadly, MCA, he died in 2012 as well of cancer. So, but before that, they put out a lot of great music, the Beastie Boys. Next up, probably one of the, if not the most well-known hair metal band, Poison, from 1986. Look What the Cat Dragged In. Bret Michaels, lead singer, CC DeVille on lead guitar. They also, not only hair metal but glam metal. You had the makeup going on and whatnot. And this album featured "I Want Action," "Talk Dirty to Me," and "I Won't Forget You." These guys had a pretty stellar career. For the short term that it was, before the 90s hit anyway. And they made the best of it. And Bret Michaels still tours and probably still pretty recognizable. So, next up, another hair metal band. Probably had one of the more bluesier sounds. Cinderella, Night Songs. Just another cool album. Nobody's Fool, Somebody Save Me and Shake Me. Still have, it's got the hype sticker up there. Kind of cool. Great Shape album. But another one of the elite hair metal bands of that time. Next up, from the 80s, as far as rock goes, I don't know that it gets any bigger than this album here, and I'm talking about from 1987, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. You have the Celtic Cross with the the skulls of the 5 band members. Of course, that's you got Slash, with the hat, and there's Axl in the middle. And then you have Steven Adler, Izzy Stradlin, and Duff McKagan in this group. This is an '87 pressing, but not an original first pressing, just because their original cover was controversial, and I'll let you Google that one. But still very early pressing of this album. Right off the bat, you could not help but to love this album. Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, Paradise City, probably, maybe my favorite song off of this album. I do love Sweet Child of Mine. Has that opening guitar riff from Slash. You know immediately what it is when you hear it. This album was actually ranked 8th with Rolling Stone, and easily a top 10 album. I don't disagree with that, but it could have been number 1. I mean, just great. Next up, another kind of a, I don't know if you put these guys in the hair metal or not. I don't really think you do, but because they kind of came around at the end of the 80s. From 1989, Skid Row, self-titled. Sebastian Bach actually signed this for me over the summer, Beaver Dam Amphitheater. So, Youth Gone Wild, 18 Life, I Remember You, 3 great songs off of this album. They were actually signed by John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora's publishing company whenever this came out. Sebastian Bach, not the original singer, but he was before they became the lead singer before they put out this album, and he replaced a fellow by the name of Matt Fallon. Too bad for him, right? So anyway, yeah, Skid Row. This is an original pressing, so not it's been reissued, so you can get it. But the original pressing, if you want it, it's a little pricey, about $60-$70 for that if you found it. Next up, another country album, and like I said before, I'm not a big country person, again, but I also know iconic, whenever I come across it, albums that you just can't pass up because of who this person is. And I don't know that it gets any bigger than this guy right here in country music ever. Garth Brooks from 1989, his self-titled album. And at the time that I got this album, it was the most that I'd ever paid for an album. And this has been I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now. Of course, I got it at one of these secondhand places, and I think they wanted $40 for it. And I've never paid close to that for an album, and I'm just like, man, I don't know if I can pay that for an album. Now, but that's that's for any new record, at Walmart just about, but I knew, this was his debut. Hard to come by because 1989, that's whenever vinyl, you're starting to see less and less of it in favor of CDs and still cassette tapes. So I'd actually pass it up, and then I thought about it. I was like, man, I gotta go back and get that record just because of it's his debut, and you just don't see this album come around too often. And fortunately, I went back and it was still there, and so now this album I paid like I said, around $40 for. Now it's worth probably 3 to 4 times that. Just like I said, just because it's a '89 pressing, and as you get into the '90s, those albums, the supply of vinyl just drastically starts to go down. And and then you'll see when we get into the 90s here, which I'm going to start out right now, getting into the 90s, and these are of course reissues. They made a lot of these albums. They had original pressings, but they're hard to come by and they're expensive if you do come by them. And even the reissues can be expensive. And unfortunately, I came across this one not too long ago. Didn't pay. And I paid $35 for this one, but it's probably my favorite grunge band from 1990, Alice in Chains. They had a different sound to them. They just did. They were from Seattle. Had this gloomy fall. When I think of like fall music, I think of Alice in Chains because it had this gloomy kind of sound to them, but it was still just the sound. You just couldn't help but to like it. Jerry Cantrell, the lead guitarist, he's credited kind of with coming up with the band's sound. Of course, the band's lead singer, Lane Staley, he died, early, like around 2002 or something like that. And, but you're talking about We Die Young, Man in a Box, Sea of Sorrow, and Bleed the Freak on this album right here. And just great. The 90s brought out some of the, Alice in Chains, with their album, and then came Pearl Jam with 10. Just another great album. Another band from Seattle, led by Eddie Vedder, the lead singer. You're talking about songs like Alive, Even Flow, Jeremy, Oceans. And kind of a unique fact about this album is that the album title 10 actually comes from the NBA player Mookie Blaylock. Apparently the band, or at least some band members, were really a big fan of Mookie's. And I think they were even called, before they became Pearl Jam, I think they may even call themselves Mookie Blaylock. But definitely the 10 comes from Mookie Blaylock's jersey number back whenever he was an NBA player. So just a kind of an interesting thing about Pearl Jam, but one of the iconic grunge albums. Unfortunately, I don't have Nirvana's. I've got other Nirvana albums, but I don't have their debut. Of course, when everybody thinks about grunge, they think about Nirvana. I have. I just don't have. I think it was Bleach was their debut album, but you can get that, I think, reissue. But for whatever reason, I've just never picked it up. But we're going to go into a band here, which was whenever I was talking about Run DMC and and how they started that rap explosion, and then how it evolved as hip hop went along. And this group right here was part of that evolution of it. And I'm talking about Rage Against the Machine. It was kind of like rap metal. And this is a provocative cover because it's a famous photograph of a Vietnamese monk who set himself on fire in 1963. He was in protest to the Vietnamese president oppressing the Buddhist religion there. And Rage Against the Machine, they were known for for being kind of political, kind of social justice in their lyrics, and this wasn't fluff by any means. So, but from right off the bat, they just hit you with the cool guitar riffs and the drums, and just it was just unique, and they went on to have a pretty successful discography. But this one right here definitely put them on the map. So, Rage Against the Machine, a reissue from 1992. And this next album, I talked about in a previous video, but you know, this is an original pressing of the Foo Fighters debut, 1994. Dave Grohl wrote all the songs, played all the instruments on this album. And of course, he was the drummer for Nirvana, and of course, whenever Cobain died, it was one of those things where the guy just wasn't done, and so he went on to produce this album. It had songs on there, included Big Me, This Is a Call, I'll Stick Around, and Nirvana was put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014, and then in 2021, the Foo Fighters, probably, my top 1-2 rock bands of all time. Seen them in concert, one of the best concerts I've ever seen, and another one of my grills. We talk about original pressings, especially from the 90s. You just don't find, or at least come across original pressings from the 90s, and if you do, they're so expensive. I mean, it's hard to justify the cost, but I got that one out of a collection of about 150 records. I think I've said that before, and it was, just a pleasant surprise. Let's put it that way. And so we're gonna, after that, because vinyl, because it almost disappeared in the 90s. They're starting to reissue more and more of those 90s albums that did not even have, vinyl pressings. So more and more of those are coming out. But I don't have any more from 94 on, as far as groups who came out in the mid 90s. Beyond that, so I'm getting into 2000s right here, and so for whatever reason in the 2000s, bands started, getting back into vinyl a little bit more, and this is one of them. And I don't know if this band is everybody's cup of tea. I enjoy them, but I'm talking about Panic at the Disco. This is an original pressing of their 2005 debut. I don't know, you can describe them as kind of like psychedelic pop, or pop punk. This is called a Fever You Can't Sweat Out. Discovered by Fall Out Boy's bassist Pete Wentz. They were a Las Vegas band, Panic. That's where they were playing whenever they were discovered. This album featured their singles, I Write Sins, Not Tragedies, But It's Better If You Do, Bill God, Then We'll Talk. For whatever reason, I got into this band. One of the few bands that my daughters actually listen to, and can relate to. A lot of the other, especially the early rap, my kids just, can't get into so much. Especially, and even like the classic rock, they come around on some of it. But hopefully as they get older, they'll start appreciating more of some of this, of the older stuff that I've showed you. But next up, from 2008, Lady Gaga, The Fame. Original pressing of this. You can still find this album, but Poker Face, Paparazzi, Just Dance, On Top of the World. This was actually ranked 97th for Rolling Stone, and of course she's gone on to appear in movies, and very talented singer. I think she's a very good actress. She was in The Star Is Born, Bradley Cooper. I thought that was a great movie. And you know, I respect her music, and I came across that one day for cheap and picked it up, and so I've never even opened it. So it's still sealed. And also, I forgot to tell you that Rage Against the Machine album ranked number 69 Rolling Stone debut albums. Um, Next up, from 2012, Imagine Dragons. Um, this is kind of a popish, pop rock, another one of those pop rock groups. This is called Night Visions. Radioactive was the big song off of this. Another song, It's Time, On Top of the World. Um, you know, they're not everybody's cup of tea. Some people think they're a little too fluff or whatever. But like I said, I just think for debut albums whenever I come across them, whether I'm really into them or not. If I find a good deal on them, I'm like, yeah, that's a debut album. I'll take it, and because if anything, whether I keep it or not, somebody else may want it, so every now and then, if I think that I'm never going to listen to that album, then I may sell it or whatever. But most of the time, I keep most of my debuts just because of the historical aspect of it. Another album from 2012. One of my all-time favorite kind of modern blues artist, I guess. Modern or neo soul artist. Talking about Gary Clark Jr. His album Black and Blue. Ain't Messing Around. Just a great song on here. Great guitars. Like I said, very bluesy sounding, but it has a modern take on it. And the guy is a phenomenal singer, talented beyond anything that I can imagine. And I dabble in guitar myself, and I do nothing but just hear this guy and just in awe of whenever I hear him play. This was a fairly recent purchase as well. And that's an original pressing of this. It's not an expensive album, but still, it was just kind of cool to come across, and I'm glad to have it. And then, kind of lastly, and this is going to end us at 2013. I'm going to end the video on this. I just haven't gotten into this album a whole lot. The only reason why I even have it here is because it's my daughter's. Okay, I'm not even going to try to even play this as my record. But I thought it was kind of interesting because this is, ranked on the Rolling Stones Top 100. So I found it a little strange because it's another country album. She may have been the only country album on this list, but anyway, it's Kacey Musgraves' album, same trailer, different park. She's from Texas, only I think like 34 years old, so still very young, and she's done very well for herself with after this debut. Had Merry Go Round, Blowing Smoke, Follow Your Arrow, and Keep It to Yourself. So, she's one of these artists. Like I said, my daughters love them or love her, and she just sounds like another country album to me. But what do I know, right? That I guess will do it for the great debut debate. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of those albums, and and hearing about some of the history of them. I'll be coming back with some other albums from probably some of these artists, but not their debuts. A little later on with some other topics I'm going to get into. Couple of things you can do. One is subscribe if you haven't already. Then hit the bell. Where it lets you know that every time I put up a new video, you can know that by being alerted. And also, kind of an announcement here. I have been approved to be a seller on the app Whatnot, or it's also a website. And so if you want to get on there, and I'll be one of many vinyl sellers on there, but it's a live auction, and where you can go on there and bid on albums live, and it's like going to to an auction, at a home. There's some people who are auctioning off their goods, and you get this guy talking real fast and selling albums. But this is specific toward vinyl albums. So if you want on there, if you want to get on there and bid on some albums, you might find it pretty interesting, entertaining at least. But you can look me up, Bo Records, on Whatnot, and just look for me, and you can bookmark it for whenever my show starts. I'll be planning my first show here, hopefully in the next week or so, and and I hope you guys will tune into that as well. So I guess that's it for now. Until the next show, I'm Don Wilkins for Bo Records. I'm out.